It's another week and another episode of the Hockey Hub, kind of soloing this one because we have a lot of sound to get to. No need for a co-host when you had Don Sweeney, Charlie Jacobs, Cam Neely almost talk for an hour at the end of season press conference, answering a lot of questions and a lot of honesty. Some answers were clear, some, as we knew, we're going to have to wait for the summer to find out, but that's what this episode is going to be about. We're going to replay some of the highlights, the big quotes that we want you to be aware of, and we've got some one-on-ones coming up. So I'm not going to chat anymore. I'm not going to blab. I'm just going to throw right to the guys and the panel. We'll be back to toss to some one-on-ones, but let's hear from the panel at the end of season press conference for the Boston Bruins.
With me today, to my left, are Boston Bruins CEO Charlie Jacobs, President Cam Neely, and General Manager Don Sweeney. Once we start the Q&A of today's availability, I ask that you raise your hand and signal for one of our two wireless mics that will be held by Pat and by Hannah. When it is your turn to ask a question, I kindly ask that you state your name and your outlet for our live audience, and designate who your question is for. Prior to that, to begin, I'd like to turn things over to Charlie, Cam, and Don, who will each make individual statements.
Good morning, and thank you. First and foremost, before we get started, I'd like to thank our fan base for your loyalty and dedication. I'm obviously quite biased, but I happen to think that Boston has the most passionate and loyal fans in all of the National Hockey League. We owe you a better team, and we aim to deliver a better team. I share your disappointment and, frankly, embarrassment on how poorly things played out over the course of this season, and I cannot thank you enough for your continued support. We embrace your criticism because it's well-deserved. And I want you to know it fuels myself and it fuels the two gentlemen to my left to do better, which we will. And speaking of Cam and Don, I'm proud to sit alongside these two gentlemen because I know we've got the right people in the right seats on the bus to bring this franchise back to glory. Now let me be clear. The results from last season are absolutely unacceptable, and accountability has never been higher. However, I need to tell you that when deciding what is best for the long-term success of this franchise, we have to be pragmatic and use data-driven decisions. Now, Cam and Don, in their respective roles as president and general manager, have proven that they can take a franchise that has missed the playoffs and build one for sustained success. It is my opinion that we can do it again, and this time get over the hump and become a Stanley Cup champion. I don't think it's an accident that the Bruins are tied for the best winning percentage in the National Hockey League since Don Sweeney's hiring. We've made the postseasons 8 years in a row prior to this spring, and we've made a lot of historic achievements along this journey. I also applaud Don, as I find that he's an industry leader, and specifically I'm referring to general manager for the Four Nations tournament we just hosted this past spring here in Boston, but also being appointed the AGM for Canada's Olympic team next winter. But today is a time to look forward, to hold ourselves to a higher standard, and I believe strongly that we can bring a Stanley Cup back here to Boston. I feel we're in a great position to do so, and I invite our incredible and loyal fans to come along with the ride with us, because together we can do this.
I echo Charlie's remarks about our fans. I mean, I go to every other building in the league, and to see the passion, the loyalty, the commitment to our franchise is at the tops of the league, in my opinion. This year was very frustrating for all of us, especially our fans. We have high expectations, and we didn't meet them this year. We fell way short, and it's disappointing for us sitting up here. It's disappointing for our fan base. They deserve better. They've supported us for 100-plus years. This gives us an opportunity to regroup a little bit, reset, and build back better. That's what I'm thinking we're going to do. That's what I entrust Don to do. Don has been a great GM in this league. Has everything gone right? No, it doesn't. That's just sports. But there's been more good than bad. Don and his group, in my opinion, have earned the right to get us back to where we all want to be. Don?
I want to thank Cam and Charlie first and foremost for instilling confidence in our group, me as the general manager. As Charlie referenced, we've had a lot of success regular season. We've gotten to the pinnacle one time in 2019, and we have to accept. I have to accept the responsibility that this team significantly underperformed, and the frustration that the fan base has. The unique position that Cam and I both have as a player, knowing what this city craves in its hockey team, and we need to deliver that. I think we've done a good job over the course of my tenure as general manager to try and aspire to put the most competitive team we can possibly put together each and every year. We have not hit a reset in quite some time, and pragmatically we chose that decision at this year's deadline to start to deepen a prospect pool, to look forward to what we have to do to hit the reset, to reestablish a core group, and to get us back to the competitive level that this organization deserves, the city deserves, and our fan base deserves. And again, we're going to we've already put a plan in place. We started it at the deadline to reestablish the leadership group that'll be necessary, and to surround them with the most competitive, driven players that we can possibly put together, and that'll include a coaching search.
Thank you, guys. Now we'll begin our Q&A portion. Again, Hannah over there, Pat over there, 2 wireless mics. When it is your turn to ask a question, ask that you introduce yourself and your outlet and who your question is for. Steve, why don't you kick us off?
Steve Conroy, Boston Herald. Don, with the holes that you have in the lineup, and I realize you do have some pieces that most rebuilding teams don't have, but with the holes that you have, how long do you think it will take to build a sustained contender, as Charlie had mentioned?
Well, we have to get back to full health in key positions that, certainly we missed Hampus for a significant portion of the year, and Charlie for a significant portion of the year. It probably starts there in the health of our group. We have to find, either through the development of our current players, some extra scoring potential. And we have to probably address the wing positions that will deepen, the scoring ability that showed up ineffectively this year in the way the roster was built. We didn't score enough. We put a lot of pressure because our power play was dormant for most of the season. And when we didn't defend with the structure and conviction that we have in years past and did when Joe first took over and did a really good job, we went from being a middle of the ground defending team to arguably one of the best defending teams in the league as to what the expected data would tell us. And then in January 3rd, we have a real pivot point that we all of a sudden did not. And that's the problem that started to creep in, where you start to have scoring deficiencies in players that certainly weren't, relative to the year before, hitting their watermarks. Obviously, David and Morgan had terrific offensive years, and so we need to be able to complement that in a much better fashion. But I think the scoring potential of our group needs to be increased and addressed this summer. But we need to get back to the competitive level, the speed, and defending with the conviction that we have been doing.
Adam Pellerin, NESN. What's the status in the search for a new head coach, and is Joe still in the mix for that?
So I spoke with Joe at length. Obviously, we met with our coaches in a debrief, and I've spoken at length with Joe. He's aware that we're going to have a coaching search. He's aware that he'll be part of the final group of coaches that we get down to, because I think he's earned and deserved that. Joe, when he took over the 20 games, did a really, really good job. And as I referenced, because I've gone back and looked at the record of our team and where things went sideways with us, we couldn't get back on the rails. On January 3rd, we were at 20-15-4, had gotten back to a .565 winning, point percentage-wise, and then we went 9-12-4 in the next 25 games, and that's not good enough. Our schedule was arguably a little harder at that point in time, but it's still not good enough. And we need to address, obviously, get our goaltenders back to where they're pushing each other, and defending in front of them much better. And that will be part of the coaching search. So we've already started that process and knowing who's available, and narrowing that down as I go through some checkpoints in terms of hitting the criteria. Communication with players nowadays is paramount. Structure, detail, being organized is paramount. You can't have it and survive. I want a coach that's going to evolve a little bit offensively, and again, that's part and parcel with being able to communicate with sometimes younger players and their stubbornness or their inexperience. We went through some of that this year where players were below their watermarks and they couldn't get back away from it. For a period of time in the 20 games, they defended with a conviction, but then they got away from it. So we have to have that detail. We have to get our power play back on course. This is a year where both specialty teams were significantly underperforming. Goaltending was part of that. Our goaltenders weren't very good on the penalty kill side of things, as the stats would show us. But again, that might be the breakdowns in front of them from a penalty kill standpoint. And driving internal competitiveness is something we have to get back to. And a coach has to be an extension of that. So we are going to address those things through the coaching search, and we're not going to lower the expectations. We have to get back into being that competitive group. To answer Steve honestly, to say, I think we're back in the mix with the group of guys if we stay healthy and we do our jobs this summer.
Don, Matt Votor from Mass Live. Are you comfortable in this, as you're going through the coaching search, are you looking for somebody that can be successful similarly style-wise to what has been successful for you guys over a long period of time? Or right now, are you open to kind of different things style-wise in terms of the way this team plays going forward as you rebuild the roster?
Well, I've had the good fortune of working with three, and counting Joe, 4 different coaches from what they value. And I do believe the league you need to continue to evolve. That's why I referenced that, evolve offensively, especially with younger players and integrating them. But if you don't defend in the National Hockey League, you don't have sustained success. However you want to do it, whether that's zone, man-to-man, whether that's a hybrid, whether that's, neutral zone, whether that's, you look at LA's situation this year going from, 1-3-1 to a little bit more of a pressure situation that they're doing, but they still do a really good job. They led the league in goals against. That's part of winning hockey. It just has to be, and it's going to be part of our fabric. We're going to get back to that. Now, we have to continue to evolve offensively, as I referenced the scoring deficiencies that we had this year, and our power play in particular put a lot of pressure on our team that you have to be perfect. Our goaltenders previously have been really, really good. This year, they weren't as good as what they had been. That's fact. And our team in front of them didn't defend with the same level of conviction. So the structure has to be there. It has to be part of the fabric of what a coach believes in. But I do understand that the players coming into the league are offensively driven. And they need to understand that it's okay to play with that offensive creativity. But it has to be within the confines of what your team and the structure is going to dictate in order to be successful.
Hi, Tara Sullivan from the Boston Globe. In regards to the coaching search, if maybe each of you would just sort of let us know any nuts and bolts you're willing to share as to your individual roles in the search. And my question about it is sort of twofold. Like, one, when you're in those conversations, is the perception of the job from the outside as a rebuild, a teardown, or do you feel like coaches that you're meeting with or prospective coaches see this as almost win now or closer to win now? And I am curious if there's been any questioning of you based on dismissing 3 coaches in your tenure, any pushback about getting enough time to do the job?
From the coaches themselves?
Yeah.
I'll call you up and let you know, Tara, if somebody turns it down the invitation to interview for one of the most historic jobs in the National Hockey League. I understand.
Have that conversation.
I've gone through one coaching search in my tenure during the time here. As I said, I had the privilege of working with Claude. I turned Bruce from an interim into a head coach didn't go through a search. So the previous time we went through a search, and it was extensive. And we came down with several coaches that we chose a really good coach who went on to have a really good year. The way we described that, and Cam was part of the process, other people were also part of the process and will continue to be part of the process. Charlie was part of the process at the end to understand, the personality and what this coach wanted to sign up for. So in part of the exercise in going forward, every coach that comes through the door will be looking forward to working for the Boston Bruins. We have a 100-year history. We have an incredible amount of success. That's going to drive the bus. Don Sweeney interviewing the person is not driving the bus. I'm entrusted to make every decision possible in the best interest of the organization, and I'm never going to stop doing that. The deadline was a perfect example of what was painful personally and professionally, but almost every general manager goes through it at some point in time, and I don't want to go through it again. I want to build exactly the way we had been doing, and I want a coach to be part of that. They will be entrusted to understand organizationally they have the full support when we make a decision, that they'll be in place, and with the expectations that we are going to be a highly competitive team again, with the expectations to win, whether that's next year, the following year, or the year after, it's going to remain in place. So this is not, we took a step back at the deadline, and now we're going to take our steps forward, and the coach is going to understand that, and he's going to love being part of the Boston Bruins organization, regardless of whether or not he's working with Don Sweeney.
Scott McLaughlin, WEI. For Charlie, is there a mandate from your end that this team is back in the playoffs next year? And is there any appetite for this to potentially take longer than that to build back?
I would defer to by the way, we've had this conversation. Are the playoffs in the discussion for next year? And the response that I got from both Cam and Don was absolutely. We feel like we have a team that's we've already addressed this, that we have a team that we feel, and again, everyone needs to stay healthy, we can make the playoffs absolutely, and make a push.
The biggest thing for me is I don't want everybody just focus on making the playoffs. Yes, we do want to make the playoffs, but we have bigger goals in mind than just making the playoffs. It's not just about getting in and getting bounced in round one. We're here to understand that we have to build a team that's going to compete for Stanley Cups. I mean, Don and his group have done it before. I have full confidence we can do it again. The game is so fickle. We win in 2019 in Game 7 at home here. I don't know what the conversations are externally after that, but I think it's not just about getting into the playoffs here. It's about winning.
I'll follow up just quickly because back in 2007, we charted a course as an organization that we were going to build a team that was going to have sustained success. In 2016, we did the exact same thing in similar fashion and got right back to the doorstep. We've been highly competitive. We just haven't gotten across the finish line. And would I like to have won in 13 and 19? Absolutely. There's no question that's what drives us. The goal is not just to be a playoff team. That's never been the goal. That's never been the mandate. That's never been the goal. It's been an expectation that you're a playoff team in order to win and achieve the ultimate goal, and that's what we're going to try and do.
To follow up on some of the coaching search questions, I have a few here. So have you started the process yet besides Joe? As well as, would you be open to a candidate that has no NHL experience, someone from, say, college or the AHL, as part of your coaching search?
I have started it. I've started the background part of criteria, as I referenced, speaking with people that I know will be available, that are currently available, that would be interested. Starting again back to the criteria. Does it have to include NHL experience on a head coaching level? No. It has to include some form of, it should include some form of NHL exposure. But if somebody blows you away, they blow you away. I don't think I'm going to narrow it down to just, I think that's a disjustice to the process. So I'm going to take the process and identify, as I said, the criteria that we have in place and go through it. Similar to last time and similar to where we got down to, 3 candidates in the situation that they've all been head coaches in the National Hockey League. So you feel good about that and they've had success. The person who comes into this door is going to have success. We're going to set them up for that. We're going to work with them with that. And but having NHL experience is part of that. They don't have to be currently an NHL coach, but exposure to the league is important.
Kevin DuPont, Boston Globe. I've got a question for each of you, a different question if I could. I'll start with you, Charlie. You mentioned how tough this year was, an embarrassment to use your word. Would you consider rescinding the 4% price increase for the season ticket holders?
Well,
on top of the 9% last year.
I see. Ticket pricing is a sensitive subject. I'm aware of that. Things cost more. The way our structure of the U.S. economy is based is things cost more. I expect that you probably pay your higher electric bill than you did last year. I know that we, for instance, pay more to open our building for security, for ushers, for concession workers, for parking attendants, everything. People deserve a raise and an increase. Likewise, we increase our ticket prices as our expenses go. I mentioned this before. Every dollar we bring in, 50% goes to the players. We share it. We're in a partnership together with them. So the ticket increase, the price, whether it's 4% or 9%, is all going back into the hockey club. So we've made our decision. We've raised our ticket prices, and no, we will not be rescinding that.
Okay, Cam, question on drafting and development. Neither of them have really been up to expectations, in my opinion.
So can you just elaborate on that, Kevin?
The drafting?
Yeah.
Well,
where we've picked and who we've picked and how it's turned out.
Well, where you've picked is not a lot of top 10 picks, but ultimately,
not a lot of first-round picks.
But ultimately, are those draft picks? Have they developed? Have they come in? Have they come online the way you want them? If that's the case, fine. But
well, obviously, you want to hit on all your picks. There's no question. I mean, the work that the scouts do throughout the course of a year, they put in a lot of time and effort. They understand the players as best they can. We get the information from the scouts. Don ultimately ends up making the picks with the information that he gets from the scouts throughout the year. But I think that our drafting and developing, the narrative there is a little off. And it's been going on for quite some time. Goes back to 15. And 15, it was really unfair to Don. By the time Don got hired, it was late May. Draft was late June. He wasn't even probably thinking about being a general manager of the Boston Bruins at the time. What Don did leading up to the draft to make the acquisitions that he did with those picks, to get the 3 picks, I thought was really good. Then Don was trying to move up in the draft. It didn't work out. What we should have done, looking back, we should have taken some time out and said, okay, guys, let's regroup here. We didn't move up. We got 3 picks in a row. I think it was very new for everybody. We stood backstage for those 3 picks. What we should have done was get back to our table and say, okay, let's sit down and say, are we okay with our list? And, look, these are things you try to learn from. Other picks throughout after that, I think we've got a number of players, not necessarily playing with the Boston Bruins, but a number of players that we have drafted that have played NHL hockey games. We have traded those picks. We have traded some of the prospects to try and improve our club to win the Stanley Cups. So the narrative that we're not hitting on all our draft picks. No one is. You pick in the top 10, you better hit. We haven't done that in quite some time. So have we been perfect? No. Can we be better? Yes.
I don't think anybody's asking to be perfect. I'm asking going forward here, because that's 10 years ago. The 10 subsequent years, are you satisfied with the draft picks and the development of those picks 10 years later?
Not with everyone, no. No, I mean, it's when you're picking and looking at 17-year-old kids, you're hoping they're going to be NHL players by the time they're 23, 24 at the latest. It takes some time for these kids to develop, and some develop at different ages, some don't develop at all. But we can be better, Kevin. There's no question we can be better, but it's not as bad as everybody thinks.
Okay, and last one, Don, thank you, first of all. Return on investment specifically of Zadorov and Elias Lindholm, vastly below what many of us expected. I'd like to get your interpretation of the return on investment of those two players, and specifically whether there's something coming that would lead you to believe their performance is going to be better than what we saw this year. Thank you.
Well, I'll take it in conjunction with where our team performed. I can address each player individually. Elias got out of the gate slowly with an injury, as did several of our players. Didn't develop the chemistry early on that we had hoped with David. Late in the season, went back to play with him, played very well there. So that's the hope that a player that can take a lion's share of harder matchups, but still can produce. Is he below the levels we would like him to be offensively? He lost confidence in his shooting, in the bumper, and our power play was not very effective during the course of the season. So all players go through that adjustment coming to a new city. There's a bunch of things that those aren't excuses. He didn't offer one single excuse. He didn't use the injury as an excuse. He still had, a reasonable offensive year. It's not what we had hoped, what we expect, and we expect it to be higher. He actually had more points than he had the previous year, but again, that's not what we'd hoped for. In Nikita's case, came in and was very rambunctious to start the year and took a lot of penalties as a result of it, put himself behind the 8 ball. If you look at him statistically, he had his point totals, again, the raw statistics, we don't really look at plus minus all that much, from the standpoint of performance, but it is an indicator of, when good things are happening on the ice versus bad things are happening on the ice. And, he led our team in a significant margin there. So and he stood up for a lot of players. There was a lot of opportunities during the course of the year where other teams, trying to exert their will, and they had a tough time because he'd go right by their bench, he'd go right by our bench, and, I've read enough of your work over the years, and I think you appreciate that. So I don't think it should be lost on any of us that he brought some of that to the table and will continue to bring some of that to the table. Could he get better? Absolutely. Do we expect both of them to get better and impact our team? Absolutely. ROI for it? Yeah, it's got to go up. Ultimately, when you integrate those guys in there, you want immediate impact, for certain. But they started to grow into their roles and understanding of how they're going to impact our team going forward, and we need to do a better job surrounding them. In Zadorov's case, he played with every different partner known to man this year that we put on the roster, and it didn't help him. It didn't help settle the game down at times, certainly, and we missed Hampus in a lot of ways, and hopefully a healthy start to the season, a great off season, a conditioning phase that, in Elias's case, he's going to the World Championships, will be healthy when he comes back, has a really good summer, and gets off to a much better start for us. In both cases, as I referenced earlier, the conditioning and the way training camp went, I'm not particularly happy with, so we're going to address it.
Gail Triani with NESN. Don, this question's for you. Going back to the trade deadline, moving on from Brandon Carlo, Charlie Coyle, what type of players do you think are either in the organization that can fill their roles, especially on the PK, or are you going to look outside to try and fill those roles?
Well, it's going to be a combination of both. You saw players step into the vacancies of those situations and at times do a pretty good job and other times struggle. Those are unique qualities that players grow into. They're not ready-made. Brandon, in his case, is an elite penalty killer in the National Hockey League, and Charlie Coyle is as well. And that's why their teams are going to have success in the playoffs. If they're slotted appropriately on our team, we have success, which we have had. So the next players have to go in and go through some of those learning curve experiences. Fraser Minton's a left-hand shot, goes in, he's taking draws on the left side. That's different from Charlie. So we have to have players grow and assume those responsibilities. That's what, obviously Prov is entering the playoffs tonight. We're going to see how they respond to those and see whether or not they can grow and graduate, for lack of a better term, graduate to be able to do it in the National Hockey League. And if not, we'll have to address it from the outside and probably bring in a little bit more experience, as I referenced on the wing, to spread the scoring ability around. We lost quality people and quality players. And that's what made it so professionally and personally painful at the deadline, because they've been successful. They're going to continue to be successful. And it's opportunity for somebody else to come in, as you referenced, to take over those minutes.
I have one question for Don and one for Cam, if I could. Don, you've referenced not getting an extension done with Jim Montgomery, and you referenced the training camp. In retrospect, do you regret not having more of an answer or making a decision last off season in terms of Jim Montgomery's future with the team?
I don't have a regret from the standpoint of not being able to complete a deal. It takes two people to complete a deal, and I would use that on a cast or wider net. We had several players that dug their heels in situations, and I'm not going to begrudge anybody. If they feel that the marketplace is going to bear more fruit for them, then they should pursue what they feel is best for in their best interest. I have to make decisions for the organization to put the jigsaw puzzle together in the best interest of our team. And sometimes you have to bend, and I recognize that. There's plenty of times where I have. And there's other times where I'm trying to look at the longer projection of things and not bending. And sometimes you get, a stalemate as a result of it. You hope you don't, because you enter into negotiations trying to find a deal, not hoping not to. In every one of those, we offered contracts to every single person. Unfortunately, it didn't come to bear on several of them, and we made decisions as a result of that. There are two sides to that street in the negotiation part of the process.
And Cam, different position, but there was a report that Don is entering the final year of his contract. A, can you confirm that? And B, is there a
That's not a report. I said it earlier.
Okay. Okay, fair enough.
You want to validate it? You can validate it. It doesn't have any bearing on, again, as I referenced, not to jump in front of Cam and finish the question, it's not going to have any bearing on the decisions. The same questions come up in the deadline. It's irrelevant from the standpoint of the job that I'm going to try and do for the organization. They both know that.
Cam, is there any desire to get an extension done, or could you go through next season with that one?
Given a lot of thought, I'm still contemplating what the best course of action is. But as I mentioned, I really feel like Don has done a good job here for the most part. Him and his staff have been very collaborative. I like when I sit in their meetings how collaborative they are. Obviously, the year that we had is a huge disappointment, and that falls on all of us, not just Don. That falls on all of us. I'll figure that out in the near future with that particular question, whether we're going to re-sign Don or not. But he's got another year left.
Bridget Pruitt, WEI, both these are for Don.
Again, it takes two to tango.
So the first one, just to follow up on what you said about Morgan Geekie's contract, is there a term length that you're targeting with him, and how confident are you that you're going to get to that deal? I
will reserve those conversations with my internal group, and obviously if Morgan or his representatives decide to publicize that, then that's perfectly fine with them. They have a goal. We have a goal. I'm not boxed into any one particular year. We're going to look at the entire whether that's term and AAV and all the other things that go with it and find the landing spot. Our goal is to have a long-term deal.
And second question, you mentioned Swayman's workload and wanting to have more of a competition with Korpisalo. Is there a difference in approach in how much of a workload you're going to give both of the guys next season?
Well, we're going to go with what we've always done, in terms of who has the hot hand, who can win, without losing sight of a person needs to have reps. and needs to have game opportunities. And at times this year, there were a couple opportunities that I've discussed with Bob and Joe that we probably missed an opportunity to allow Corpy to have a little bit of that rope, in particular when he was playing well. That's sometimes the decisions that, as Bob would say, the goalie excellence department, the goalie not as excellent department this year, and he's been on record as saying that.
Anyone else? Steve, and then Kevin.
Don, just on the coaching search, do you have a timeline on that, and do you think it'd be necessary to have a coach in place when free agency starts so free agents know what they're getting into?
Probably in a perfect world. Timing might be that the coaches that we identify are still part of the NHL playoffs, and when you get permission, when's the appropriate time to get permission and opportunity, could present some challenges. I'll be forward thinking and communicating with that with certain people, but very respectful of their situations and what they're trying to accomplish. I don't have a definitive timeline, but my hope would be we'd be far along at that point in time.
Don,
We there? There we are. Don, some years you've had a laundry list of guys headed for surgeries. I just want to get an update if that's the case this year on anybody. And also, what is your confidence on Hampus in terms of his, ready to go from the gate? There's been a lot of talk, a lot of rumors about his knee being sort of in the Kevin Miller category.
We're fortunate that outside of Pavel Zacha having a small procedure, not surgical, recently, and he's not going to go to the World Championships. Everybody right now, Johnny Beecher, I suspect may have something, small to repair. Everybody else right now is not a surgical candidate. We have several players that are going to attend the men's worlds. Elias is going, David Pastrnak is going, Jacob Lauko is going, Andrew Peak is going, Mason Lohrei is going, and Jeremy Swayman are going. So again, they're playing more hockey, so I don't have an update on that front. As relates to Hampus, the scourging part of where we're going through the season, and again, part of my job is to try to be proactive. If we knew we were missing Hampus for the entire season, we would have had to be aggressive to bring in another player. The timeline was generally about 2 months plus. And when it turned into 3 and then shut down, obviously that was disheartening for our group. And at the same time, Charlie went down. There is no indications based on the second small procedure to remove a screw that was irritating him and not part of the healing process at that point in time, which ended up shutting him down to allow it to be a natural process. There's no indications that he'll be restricted in any way, shape, or form and not back to the level of full health and impact for our hockey club, which is a big boost for us. He'll have a full off season of training, and return to play status should be 100% when September rolls around.
Yeah, Charlie, if I could just return to the question Steve sort of opened with, how long you guys foresee perhaps this reset and build back better. Do you have thoughts in mind? Could you withstand another year without the playoffs? You've been very clear it's a Stanley Cup team. If you saw other things, what do you feel about that?
If Cam and Don came to me and said, listen, we do think we have a path towards a championship team, but we need patience, of course, we can be patient. I do feel, though, and we've spoken at great length about this, the team that we currently have, healthy, with the additions we intend to make this summer, I anticipate that we'll have a playoff team and play meaningful hockey at this time of year in 2026.
Take one more from Matt.
One sort of clerical and then one larger picture. For the restricted free agents that you have, do you expect have you made decisions on whether you plan to tender each of them to bring them back?
No, we have a little more time to make our decisions there. I've been in touch with all the representatives and where they do stand at this point in time. I can't be definitive that we'll be doing that with everybody, but we're going to take the time necessary to make the final decisions.
Adam Pellerin was at TD Garden, so was Judd Sirott, asking some questions. And Adam actually got a one-on-one with CEO Charlie Jacobs. Let's have a listen to that now.
Charlie, the season ends last Tuesday. You penned a letter to the fans on Wednesday, thanking them for their support, but also expressing disappointment in the season. Why was it important to send that message right away?
Well, we have such a loyal and dedicated fan base here in Boston. We're fortunate to have such passionate fans. We haven't had a season like this in 10 years, or I think it's 10 years, maybe it's 8 or 10 years. It's been hard to keep track of how many, but it's the first time we've not made the playoffs, and I felt like they needed to hear our frustration, my frustration as a fan, and acknowledgement that our team needs to do better. And that starts with myself and, of course, Cam and Don and the players on the ice, too. So, yeah, I felt it was time for a message so that people understood I was in the boat, so to speak, with them.
You have the disappointing season, which included a coaching change in November. Familiar faces traded away, but the front office remains intact. You mentioned Cam and Don remain at the helm. For fans who might question that, how would you respond?
Well, I did some of that today during our press conference. I will share that we've been in this boat before. That is, having a team that's missed the playoffs and frankly, building it back. We've done this. Cam and Don successfully have done this. While we did not win a Stanley Cup, we came pretty darn close. We've also set the record for the most wins in a regular season in the history of the National Hockey League. All a team that's constructed by Cam and Don. And I also would be remiss if I didn't mention that Don is very well-regarded GM across the National Hockey League. I mean, Team Canada had a lot of choices in terms of who to appoint as the general manager for the Four Nations tournament, and they chose Don Sweeney because they believed in his hockey knowledge. He's also an AGM for Team Canada and the upcoming Olympics. So his peers clearly recognize his skill set and appreciate it. And I feel like we need to acknowledge that too. I think there's been a lot of chatter about, geez, these guys, they put this team together, they should be accountable. As we discussed today, it was a reset year, and I believe that we can build back better.
Culture has been a bedrock of the organization for many years, referencing Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand most recently. How important is it for that to remain intact?
So leadership is a huge, leadership and culture are huge elements on a winning hockey club. I feel like first of all, we need people that have walked the path that can show the other players the way. I don't want to make too much of it, but we have engaged in for instance, Zdeno Chara coming back and helping with some of our players understand what it takes to win. A former captain. We need that in our room. I do think we have some elements of that. I mean, I heard a lot of chatter and breakup day about whether it was who's up next, so to speak, in terms of wearing the C, and I think that'll shake out in time. I don't know if that guy's in the room today, or if it is, we'll have to step up and do it. I mean, there's a lot that comes with the leadership of the Boston Bruins, and I think that'll have to emerge over time.
Charlie, thanks for your time. Appreciate it.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks, Adam and Charlie, addressing some of the concerns or the statement made to the fans. Obviously disappointed that there was no postseason. But when it came to Cam Neely and Don Sweeney's answers, Judd went one-on-one with Cam, and they talked a little bit more on the hockey side.
Cam, let's start here. As much as the team and you and Don Sweeney had talked about it wants to improve the talent level on the team, is adding to and enhancing the culture really the thing that you have to nail here in the offseason?
Well, it's something that we've talked a lot about. There's no question. I mean, when you lose the type of leadership that we lost over the past few years, you hope those players that have played with those leaders have learned something from it. But it was a massive void losing Hampus and then ultimately Charlie from not just on ice but also off the ice. those are two guys that really have stepped up to be leaders in the organization, and not having their voice around on a daily basis had an impact.
I think one of the things for years, Cam, with this team is it was known as really sturdy defensively, hard to play against, a tough out. Some of those players have moved on. I mean, we're going all the way back to Zdeno Chara, Patrice Bergeron, Brad Marchand, a number of core players who were involved, and some of the guys departed here during the offseason. I guess with that in mind, does the identity of the team have to evolve?
Well, I still think you have to be hard to play against. There's no question. I mean, especially when you get into a 7-game series, you need to be hard to play against, or you're going home. And that starts right from training camp. That starts internally. That starts at practice. I mean, you got to compete in practice. If you don't compete in practice, you're not competing in games. So it's really something I think that we need to maintain, is be a hard team to play against and a hard out. I mean, I think, and then I don't want to see quit. We let 5, 6, 7, 8 goals in a number of times this year, which is unacceptable for us. We've always taken pride in how we play defensively, and we got to get back to that.
Just looking at your time as the team president here in Boston, in 2015 the team didn't make the playoffs. It missed again in 2016, and it wasn't until 2018 where the team was able to win a round and start to become a contender. Just how heavy a lift is this to get this team where it needs to be?
Well, it's going to take some work, and it's some of the current players that are here, they've got to get better. We hope to see some improvement from those players, and then we've got to do our job and bring in other players that are going to help get us back to where we want to be. It's going to take some work. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight. But we're going to do all we can this offseason to improve our club, and then get back at it in September and see where we're at. But it's something for us that we've got to look at where the holes are and how we can fill them, and what's the best way to do that.
From where you sit, what's the hardest part?
To be honest with you, this year watching games, it didn't matter. That was very difficult for me. It's been a long time. Even the years that we missed the playoffs, 15, 16, it was right down to the end. Those, even the last game of the year mattered. This year we made the decision at the deadline to pivot. As Don mentioned, got rid of a lot of really good players and good people, but that's the decision that was made. And, we knew the roster wasn't going to be as competitive. So it was very difficult to watch games that didn't matter in April.
The CEO, Charlie Jacobs, expressed how he felt in an open letter. He did it again here today in front of the media. I guess when it comes to trying to put this team back together, what are some of the things that you're going to have to wrestle with when it comes to patience?
Well, that's the biggest thing you said right there is patience. I mean, we can't make knee-jerk decisions in hopes that it's going to get us to where we want to be. We have to be very methodical. We have to we have to really understand what we're trying to accomplish. And if it's something that we feel like, okay, let's just pump the brakes a little bit, we're going to have to think about doing that. But right now, we're looking at, okay, how do we build this roster to get back to where we want to be?
Cam, last thing, when it comes to the coach, for years, whether it was Chara, Bergeron, Marchand, the room essentially ran itself. It wasn't an area where Claude Julien or Bruce Cassidy or Jim Montgomery felt that they needed to wade into. With some of the transition that's taking place, does the new coach, whoever it is, have to be more of an influence in there?
Well, I think it's really all dependent upon how the team performance is. The coach has a better pulse, and certainly I would or Don would, about what's going on in the locker room. It's something I think a coach should have the ability to understand where the team is at and say, okay, do I got to pat someone on the back or I got to kick someone in the butt? It's sometimes you got to be a psychologist as much as a coach. So it's really, I think it really depends on the comfort level a coach has in understanding the room and understanding the players and then what needs to be done.
Thanks, Cam.
All right. Thank you, Jed.
Okay, lots to digest, and unfortunately, we are going to have a long summer to digest it. But we're going to be going over some of these big storylines as they develop, who the head coach is going to be, contracts, pending contracts coming up. We'll have the weekend off, but tune in next Tuesday. We'll unpack some of this and look ahead. We'll see you then on Hockey Hub.